Retirement needs. So in the text I described breaking down your expenses into three priorities. That's needs, wants, and wishes. So I'd like to start with your retirement needs and what kind of falls into that category. The first thing is obvious, just basic living expenses for retirement. The things that you have to spend on utilities, power, electricity, food, gas for your automobile. All these things you have to do day in, day out. So we can't get away from it. So basic retirement living expenses is the first need. The second is healthcare. So those are usually the two big ones that kind of fall into the need categories. In the next lesson, I'll talk about wants and wishes. Wants will be more like traveling and things like that. That maybe if we had a recession, you can't necessarily cut back on your needs. You can't stop paying for healthcare. You can't stop paying for food. But you can maybe delay the traveling, delay the vacation. So the things that we can't delay, the things that we have to spend on, the necessities, are our retirement needs. And that's the topic of this lesson. So there's a rule of thumb. The thumb is about 80% of your pre-retirement expenses should be expected to spend post-retirement. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Studies, it's actually not that far off. The only maybe misleading thing about the 80% figure is that it's not a direct line. So you're not going to retire and boom, drop to 80% and stay there throughout your whole retirement. Most people, a lot of folks actually slowly taper down. And they may actually even spend a bit more right after they retire and then slowly kind of come down to pre-retirement levels. And as they get older, that it averages even further and further down. And then maybe before they pass away, healthcare costs and other things become very expensive for a lot of folks, and that contributes to a higher average. So the 80% is certainly not consistent across the board. The whole, let's say if you retire at 65 and pass away at 95, it's probably not going to be right there the entire time. So that's something to think about. But still, these are things that we should plan for. But retirement living expenses, I would think about 80% of your total pre-retirement expenses. The second thing, healthcare. Healthcare is probably going to be quite a bit expensive. I would expect to pay about $5,000 to $6,000 per person per year. So if you're married, that's $10,000 to $12,000 a year for the two of you. And that actually includes Medicare. So Medicare only covers about 60% of healthcare costs in retirement. And that's because the other 40% are things that Medicare is actually not free. And Part A is generally free. So if you qualify for Social Security, then you're going to qualify for Medicare Part A, and you're not going to have to pay any extra premium for it. However, Part A has a very big deductible. It's like $1,200 or something close to that. And that's significant. Part B actually has a premium. And if you and your spouse are in the lowest bracket, which is household income of less than about $170,000, that's all indexed to inflation and so on. But if you're making less than $170,000, then Part B is going to cost about $130 per month for each of you. So that's quite a bit. And then you got Part D for prescription drugs, which also has a cost to it. And then a lot of people buy a Medicare supplement insurance policy, which also has additional costs to that as well. So when you start adding all these things up and then adding in some out-of-pocket expenses that aren't covered by Medicare, you still end up at $5,000 to $6,000 per person per year. Now, if you kind of factor that out for a 20 to 25 year life expectancy, and if we don't actually include inflation in this calculation, then you're looking at spending over $200,000 during your retirement living years just on healthcare costs and premiums. So that's a pretty significant thing to plan for and to budget for, and I certainly think that's a retirement need. And unfortunately, another downside to medical costs are that they actually outpace the rate of inflation. So the average rates have been about 2%. The Fed targets a 2% rate of inflation. But healthcare is usually in the 4 to 5% range. So quite expensive, something you should think about, and definitely a retirement need. Now, in the next couple of lessons, we're going to talk about wants and wishes and what to expect for planning for those items. But I look forward to sharing more about with you in the next couple of sections.